This is Salvatore Romano's final scene in Mad Men. He's enclosed inside a tiny phone booth in the foreground of a group of men. Inside the booth, he calls his wife and tells her he has to stay late at work. Outside the booth, the men wait in the darkness. Sal opens the door and steps out. We never see him again. There's something very unsettling about Sal. There's a specific kind of tension that follows him around everywhere that he goes. It's the feeling that you're watching someone build an entire life around desperately avoiding something he already knows, and sensing that, eventually, it's gonna catch up with him anyways.
So we're supposed to believe that people are living one way and secretly thinking the exact opposite? That's ridiculous.
We are introduced to Sal in the pilot episode of Mad Men. He's an eligible bachelor and a member of the boys' club at Sterling Cooper. He embodies a madman. He has what a madman should have, acts how a madman should act, and goes where a madman should go. The men that he works with respect his creative abilities as art director. They seek out his friendly companionship, and they include him in their debauchery. Women desire him because he's a little different from the rest. He's artsy, he's Italian, he's
handsome, very debonair. Cologne, but not the cheap stuff. Something European, maybe.
He loves his mother, and he calls her all the time. While other men in the office seem to hunt secretaries for sport, Sal is too refined, too elegant for that. He lets the secretaries come to him. Sal knows that a man goes to work, a woman waits for him at home. Men are there to drink with, women are there to flirt with. The man will eventually buy a house in the suburbs, and he will keep it moving forward. He doesn't really bother asking too many questions about whether any of it actually makes him happy. In this world, being the right kind of man matters. Looking the part matters. And on the surface, Sal seems to be doing everything right. Because the men of this era think that he's one of them. The women of this era desire him. However, we in the audience know that he is gay. We know that this is all a performance, and that his entire well-being depends on how well he can maintain it. Sal has carefully constructed a social identity that can provide the alibi of a straight man. Marries a woman? Check. Bonds with his fellow man by degrading women together? Check. Spends time at gentlemen's clubs? Check. That might be enough for this early 1960s crowd that naturally assumes that everyone is straight by default. But it's noticeable to the audience that there's something deeper going on here. Sal is visibly going through the motions of being the type of man that he thinks he needs to be. We can see the difference in his mannerisms. We can see what and who draws his attention. We can see that his performance is often half-hearted, that his flirting with women feels rehearsed, that his participation in gawking at them feels obligatory. We can hear what he says when he thinks no one is listening, or when he's hiding his true feelings behind a quippy joke.
I love this place. It's hot, loud, filled with men.
I know what you mean.
Even within his first scene of the show, his performance is already slipping.
My neighbor posed for that, believe me. He always looks very relaxed. Of course, he doesn't smoke. Had him hold a pencil.
It feels like Sal must have received the same crisis management playbook as Don Draper. You know, the one that tells you to never confront your problems, just compartmentalize them, bury them somewhere deep, and keep it moving. The one that instructs you to dissolve yourself into your work instead, to turn your feelings into something marketable and polished, something that other people can consume without ever realizing how personal it is. Both Dawn and Sal channel themselves into advertising because they have become experts at crafting a fantasy. They are very good at understanding what people are supposed to want, even if they don't want it, and selling it right back to them. It's become a daily exercise for them, personally and professionally. Dawn through his words, Sal through his art. For Sal, being art director for an advertising company rewards the parts of him that are queer while providing cover for that queerness. He can express desire and longing without confessing anything personally. He can indulge in femininity indirectly through an ad campaign. He creates the visual concepts for a lipstick campaign with the tagline, "Mark Your Man." He directs a commercial inspired by a musical. He can lean into glamour and romance and theater because his job requires him to. He's not gay, he's just good at his job. As long as Sal can keep those feelings indirect, stylized, professional, he's able to move through the world without forcing anyone, including himself, to confront what they really mean. But that will only get him so far.
Give me a woman in a bathing suit, put her next to your guy.
A sexy girl? I can do that.
Give a chance to get a real model.
Oh, I love my work.
In season 1, Sal's performance as a straight man is convincing enough to protect him, but by season 2, we can see that the performance becomes more of a burden. The life that he has carefully built around himself begins demanding more than he's capable of giving. Maintaining his image becomes exhausting, and slowly the cracks in the performance begin to appear. As we spend more time with Sal, there's an increasing sense that everything protecting him is also quietly cornering him, and that eventually something will have to give. In season 2, we meet his wife Kitty. She explains that she grew up in Sal's Baltimore neighborhood and has always been in love with him. This revelation, along with their ongoing relationship dynamic, explains why Sal has picked Kitty as a wife. She is the path of least resistance into heterosexual partnership. In proposing to the woman who always had a crush on him, he avoids having to date women. He avoids situations that require authentic emotional participation and romantic connection with them. He picks a woman who already idealizes him, who is already 100% bought in, who may have looked past some red flags to be with him. She makes being straight feel easier for him. However, the performance begins to feel unsustainable when it requires overtime.
Where's her husband?
His home is no longer a place where he can take a break from this persona. It becomes a place where that persona must evolve and intensify, where the performance demands things that are much harder to fake. At work, Sal only has to look the part. At home, he's expected to fully inhabit it. He no longer has any reprieve, no space where he can fully exhale. The performance follows him everywhere now. You can tell that Sal deeply cares for Kitty and seems genuinely comforted by her presence. But companionship can't resolve the fundamental disconnect at the center of their marriage. Kitty wants to be loved and desired by her husband, while Sal is desperately trying to bury feelings that refuse to disappear, that keep surfacing toward someone else. Sal's attraction to Ken isn't random. Sal becomes drawn to Ken after finding connection through art. Art is the only authentic emotional language that Sal is comfortable speaking in the office, and suddenly, somebody else is speaking it. While most of the men at Sterling Cooper seem disinterested in emotional sincerity, Ken quietly reveals depths that Sal doesn't expect from him. While the other men see art as merely a means to a financial end, a strategy for executive approval, a tool to get people to buy things, he writes fiction privately, as a hobby, and asks Sal to read his work.
Would you mind taking a look at this?
Are you kidding?
I don't want you to pull any punches. Unless you hate it. In which case, don't tell me. I'm kind of fragile.
In doing so, he invites Sal into his inner world and shows a kind of vulnerability that Sal never thought he'd get to experience from another man. For once, Sal doesn't have to spend so much energy trying to understand other men. Another man proves capable of finally understanding him.
You're not like everyone else around here.
I don't know if that's true.
The dinner party with Ken becomes one of the biggest cracks in Sal's performance. Repressing feelings publicly is one thing. Repressing them inside your own marriage is another. But having those feelings surface towards someone your wife is sitting across the dinner table from introduces a new level of danger.
Tell me what you think. Be honest. I'm fragile.
Kitty watches Sal become animated, emotionally engaged, and eager to connect in ways she's been quietly longing to experience herself. He ignores her repeatedly throughout the evening, dismisses her attempts to join the conversation, and seems completely absorbed by Ken's presence. Sal seems so starved for this kind of connection that he hardly notices how harshly he's dismissing his wife, all in pursuit of just one more crumb of connection with Ken.
Do you even see me here?
Of course I do.
You wouldn't know it, Salvatore.
Sal's desires are no longer abstract. They're no longer something that he can neatly compartmentalize or bury away. They're here, they're undeniable, and they're becoming impossible to ignore. As Sal becomes less capable of suppressing these feelings privately, the world around him is also becoming more aware of people like him publicly. And unfortunately, that awareness doesn't arrive neatly packaged as acceptance. Not even close. As the 1960s progress, as counterculture movements surface and queer people become more visible, Mad Men also shows the discomfort, hostility, and ridicule that visibility is often met with. The possibility of queerness is no longer unthinkable to people like Sal, and that makes the performance he spent years carefully maintaining feel much more fragile and potentially subject to scrutiny. When Kurt tells the office,
I'm homosexual.
I don't think that means what you think it means.
Kurt. No. I make love with the men, not the woman.
Sal receives definitive confirmation that his true self would not be welcome there. He has a preview to what his friends would say about him if he were honest with them.
So Kurt is a pervert. How about that?
I knew queers existed. I just don't want to work with them.
What? He's the first homo you ever met in advertising?
Which bathroom does he use?
When Kurt's openness destabilizes the invisibility that Sal depended on, he instinctively retreats into silence, while his friends and coworkers casually discuss people like him with ridicule and disgust. In a tale as old as time, burgeoning social progress arrives hand in hand with social backlash, repeatedly reminding Sal that visibility and safety are not always the same thing, that the world may not be truly tolerant of people like him yet, just simply more aware. For Sal, the increasing cultural awareness in combination with his faltering performance is perilous. He risks being legible not only to people that would condemn him, but he also fears being legible to the very people who would offer him things that he spent his entire life avoiding. Real intimacy, the possibility of being understood, the opportunity to finally stop performing. Many of Sal's closest calls with exposure occur within the part of his life that once served as a protective shield to him, his job. The further advertising moves toward motion picture, commercials, and live direction, the harder it becomes for Sal to safely disappear behind the aesthetics, the implication, the controlled fantasy of illustration. Every new professional opportunity also prevents the opportunity to be seen. Every ad campaign, every promotion, every work trip comes with increased visibility. When Don catches Sal with a bellhop at the Baltimore hotel, he realizes that he has something in common with Sal. Don is not the only one keeping a secret. He's not the only one pretending to be somebody that he is not. And most importantly, he understands the danger of being seen. Maybe that's why, instead of telling anyone, Don offers Sal some advice.
There's a girl with her back to us. She's wearing one of those short, tan ones, but it's open. We know what he's seeing. Limit your exposure.
But by this point in the series, retreating into himself is no longer an option. The home asks for intimacy that he cannot produce, and the work that once allowed him to safely disappear behind his art is now asking him to step further into the spotlight. The deeper Sal moves into every domain of his life, the more each one begins demanding something riskier from him. When Sal is tapped to direct a commercial for Pioca, it feels like it's one of his last opportunities to prove himself at Sterling Cooper. So, for perhaps the first time in the series, he stops filtering himself so heavily and fully throws himself into another performance instead. He leans into the Broadway, the glamour, the femininity, all the things that had been quietly simmering underneath his work from the very beginning. The commercial feels deeply personal to him, even if no one around him understands why. When he performs the choreography inspired by Anne Margaret's performance in Bye Bye Birdie for Kitty, she finally sees what the audience has known all along. Her husband isn't simply too busy, too stressed, too distracted by work. He's not going to magically start loving her properly if she simply waits it out. He's gay, and you can feel the devastation of watching every excuse she's been desperately trying to believe collapse all at once. The Pioca campaign is remembered as a metaphor for Don and Betty's relationship. Birdie is Don's nickname for Betty, and he's coming to terms with Betty's unhappiness in their marriage. But we often overlook the man at the center of the campaign. We overlook the other wife who realizes that the distance in her marriage isn't temporary after all. It's clear that another marriage, at least as they know it, is ending. The heartbreaking thing about Sal is not just that he's forced to hide who he is. It's that the performance of someone he isn't consumes so much of his time, so much of his energy, that he doesn't even let himself bother to think what his life could look like without it. Every part of his life becomes organized around concealment, appeasement, and survival, keeping other people comfortable, keeping other people convinced, keeping the illusion intact. He accepts the lie that it is shameful to be who he truly is, that he should use every ounce of energy he has to avoid how he really feels, that being the man that early 1960s America wants him to be will keep him safe. But therein lies the cost of the performance. Sal spends so much of his life trying to preserve the illusion that eventually protecting it becomes instinctive, more instinctive than protecting himself. The performance, as it crumbles, it doesn't just fail to hide him, it completely disarms him.
I'm married.
So am I.
There's been a misunderstanding.
I know what I know.
To watch Sal's story also means to brace for impact, to brace for the moment that the performance slips too much and someone finds out, to brace for the real tragedy that's been looming on Sal's horizon for years. But his downfall doesn't actually begin when people see through the facade. It begins years earlier, probably long before we ever met him, when he learned that survival depends on erasing himself completely. By the time Sal's carefully constructed life finally begins collapsing around him, he's already spent years training himself to disappear first. When Sal is cornered by Sterling Cooper's largest client and rejects his advances, the client threatens to pull business from the agency. Sal is fired by Roger. He makes an emotional appeal to Don and tells him honestly what happened. But Don agrees with Roger and quietly sends Sal on his way. In one sense, he avoided what he feared most. The performance was still intact. A lot of questions surrounding his termination could be explained away. Sterling Cooper's largest client, also known for being argumentative and tempestuous, was unhappy, and Sal's firing was just another unfortunate business decision. No one outed him, no one had to know. We had avoided the moment we were bracing for. But had we? Sal's tragic ending was never simply about the possibility of being exposed. It was about what years of secrecy and shame had already taught him to tolerate. His exit feels sudden and unexpected, but it's actually just the natural endpoint of a lifetime spent learning to absorb humiliation quietly, to accept injustice without protest, to treat one's own suffering as the price of survival. To borrow a phrase from feminist scholar Bell Hooks, Sal was expected to engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation. He was very used to killing the gay man in his head. He did it every day. If an individual is not successful in emotionally crippling himself, he can count on patriarchal men to enact rituals of power that will assault his self-esteem. This is why his final conversation with Dawn is so painful to watch. Sal thought Dawn saw who he was and liked him anyways. But in Sal's moment of honesty and emotional vulnerability, when he briefly stops apologizing for himself, Dawn quickly reminds him that he stepped out of line. He picks up the guilt and the shame that Sal momentarily put down and uses them as social control.
Who do you think you're talking to?
He questions what Sal had done leading up to the encounter.
You must have been really shocked.
I was. Believe me.
But nothing happened. Because nothing could have happened because you're married.
He implies that people like Sal bring these situations upon themselves.
I guess I was just supposed to do whatever he wanted? What if it was some girl?
That would depend on what kind of girl it was and what I knew about her.
And reminds him that no matter what choice Sal made, he was always going to lose.
I didn't do anything but turn him down. He's a bully.
Lucky strike can shut off our lights.
Then, Dawn makes it clear that he is very different from Sal.
You people.
As it turns out, their camaraderie was rooted in Dawn witnessing another man lie about who he really was. It wasn't acceptance or tolerance. He had empathy for the man living with a secret, not the man who is gay. Sal's first and only line of defense had failed. If he forgot to shame himself into silence, Dawn was there to do it for him, to remind him that it would simply be easier for everyone if Sal just disappeared quietly. And men like Dawn, Roger, Lee Garner Jr., they all sit much higher than men like Sal.
I think you know that this is the way this has to be.
This is what cultures built around rigid conformity often produce. Not honesty, not stability, not fairness or healthy relationships, but entire ecosystems of secrecy, shame, and emotional isolation. Men like Sal marry women despite the absence of genuine romantic desire, trapping both parties in relationships that slowly erode intimacy, honesty, and fulfillment. Women like Kitty are left wondering what they're doing wrong, left trying to understand why they don't get to experience love. Men like Lee Garner Jr. are able to take advantage of people with the understanding that they will never see a consequence. People who are taught to hate themselves become far easier to exploit because they've already spent years being told that exposure is far worse than being violated. Sal has spent his entire life learning how to flatten himself, learning how to smooth away anything too revealing, too colorful, too complicated, all for other people's comfort, all to be merely tolerated. That instinct protects him for a while, but eventually it also leaves him defenseless. When someone spends enough time treating their identity like a problem to manage, they'll be far less likely to believe that they deserve any protection at all. By the time Sal is cornered in the editing room, he already understands the rules of the world that he lives in. It's not simply that he's gay. It's that the client's comfort matters more than his dignity. It's that the company's stability matters more than his safety. Years of shame and conditioning have created the perfect target, someone who stopped expecting that life would be fair to him, someone who didn't believe that the world would ever treat him gently. He is exploited in secret, and he doesn't tell a soul. He instead goes to work like it never happened. The man who exploited him walks away not only unscathed, but rewarded. And in the end, Sal is left to quietly absorb the fallout alone. There are no protections for people like him to speak of. He knows that there is no one coming to save him. After years of living inside a system like that, What is Sal supposed to do besides quietly let himself slip through the cracks? It was never designed to catch people like him when they fell. It was designed to filter them out. And unfortunately for Sal, the system worked exactly as intended. The show only gives us one final scene with him after this. Let's return to the phone booth. Sal calls his wife. He lies to her. He tells her he has to work late. He's not even ready to tell her the truth about his job. With all the sincerity that he can muster, he tells her that he loves her. He's alone. He's ashamed. He looks like he's been drinking. He can only do what he's about to do under the cover of darkness. We don't know if he's been here before, but it's clear that he knows what this place is. When he's ready, he takes a deep breath, opens the door, and steps out into the night. To me, Sal's ending places him at a historical crossroads shared by many queer people. Its open-ended ambiguity represents the spectrum of different outcomes for queer people historically. Some never felt safe to come out. They entered heterosexual marriages, had children, and kept their secret until the end. Maybe he called Kitty because he still wanted the marriage to work. Some were driven into isolation or they lived double lives. Maybe that's why he's drunk at a cruising spot in the middle of the night. Others came out. They felt safe enough to step out of cultural expectations and they lived the lives that they wanted to. Maybe walking out of that phone booth is Sal's first step to get there. Sal's final moments feel like every option is on the table for him. The phone booth is a threshold, a liminal space. It could be a place of heartbreak. It could be the beginning of possibility. Sal leaves such an impact because he feels like a character with so much potential who got stuck frozen in time. A fly trapped in amber. He's a classic early Mad Men character, confined to the rigid conformity of the show's first half, before the cultural upheaval of the late 1960s begin to reshape what kind of lives seem imaginable. Sal's painfully abrupt exit from the show feels like history interrupted. We never got to see what happens to him after his secret catches up with him. We never get to see the choices he makes in a world that would eventually begin to make a little more space for people like him. A world where queer people would slowly become more visible, where some begin stepping outside the lives they were expected to live, where the possibility of something more honest doesn't have to be so radical. But Sal is gone from the narrative before that future comes into view. His future is unresolved. His final scene feels suspended between countless possible outcomes that defined queer life for generations. Maybe he doubles down on the life that he's already built. Maybe shame drives him further into secrecy and isolation. Maybe he is able to step into a different kind of existence altogether. The show never tells us. Instead, it leaves him standing at the edge of a future that feels suddenly unwritten. Sal's story doesn't leave us with answers or resolution. It leaves us at the exact moment his real life might finally begin. Sal's final moment is followed by one more scene in the episode, and its structure feels familiar. Dawn stops at home in the middle of the night and lies to his wife for the billionth time. He tells her that Conrad Hilton has just called and that he has to go back into the office. Betty replies that she didn't hear the phone ring. She's freshly postpartum. Don puts on his coat and leaves to sleep with Miss Farrell, his daughter's teacher. Earlier that day, Don looked at Sal with coldness, disappointment, and disgust. But by the end of the episode, Don is also lying to his wife. He's also sneaking out into the darkness to pursue his own desires, the same way that he always does. The difference is, Don will wake up the following morning still feeling entitled to every part of the life that he's built. He will wake up and move through the world as though his desires have never cost anyone else a thing. His lies will remain survivable. His reinventions will remain available to him. the world will continue to make room for him, the same way it always does. Sal doesn't get the same guarantee. There is no reassurance waiting for him at the end of the episode. No sense that life will quietly reset itself by mourning the same way it does for other people. Instead, he's just gone, in a way that feels excruciatingly too final. His absence feels haunting to me. It's disheartening to see how Sterling Cooper moves on from him with startling ease. I'm still not over what happened to him. I was ready to see how the late 1960s shaped him, as we get to see with other characters. I wasn't ready to say goodbye. Sal's character arc feels like a half-finished sentence. His future exists only as possibility. We are instead left with a Schrödinger Sal in the phone booth. Once he steps out of it, he steps out of the show itself. And for a character whose entire life was spent performing for other people's comfort, there's something unbearably sad about never getting the chance to see who he might have been otherwise. But I like to believe, wherever Sal ended up, he no longer had to leave so much of himself behind.